Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. It's not even surprising anymore when I say Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Liberal government had a really bad week. It doesn't even need qualification anymore. They've been having bad week after bad week. And I know as conservatives, we're not shocked that they've had a bad week, but just from an electoral politics side of things, it's kind of shocking that this early on, they've been completely unable to get any wins under their belt. Like maybe they'll try and point to Bill C-5, the Major Projects Act or whatever, but even that's been demonstrated to basically be another boondoggle. We have set up an office to maybe potentially look at potentially fast tracking some projects that we may approve. It's nothing. It's just nothing. And everything else that Mark Carney and the Liberals have touched so far have turned to Trudeau. Everything has just turned into crappy Trudeau era policies. I just want to take you guys through some of the losses in just a second here to demonstrate how profoundly bad it's been for the Liberals, to the point where there are now rumors that the Liberals may try and call a snap election instead of releasing the budget. Now, do I think that's likely right now? Probably not, but I could see Carney wanting an election within the next year or so because of how badly things are going. So before all of the worst economic news hits, maybe he's going to force Canadians to go back to the polls. But before we get into the specific stories I want to talk about today, I just want to remind you that if you live in the city of Calgary like I do, check out my endorsement list that I have below for all of the positions mayor, councilor, as well as school board trustee. If you don't know who to vote for yet and you're just looking for some options, I have them down there. And then I also have options for places like Airdrie, Cochrane, Medicine Hat, Red Deer, and Edmonton. Obviously, I haven't been able to hit every small municipality around the province because that's impossible, and I am one person. Anyways, let's get it right into it. And again, that's linked in the description below and pinned to the top of the comments for that thing if you guys want my endorsements. But this is what IRCC had put out, the Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, a federal institution for covering all those areas of government, and they seriously posted this on their social media. I will not remind you, I'll indicate to you, this thing has 1.5 million views. 1.5 million people's eyes have graced this post, and it only has 161 likes, and there was 1,500 comments about it. That is a textbook ratio. There are also more retweets than there are likes, and I can guarantee you those are not supportive people retweeting it. Those are quote tweets of people mocking this. This is absolutely insane, and it's borderline scandalous. I'll read this post for you from the IRCC. Thinking about moving to Canada, did you know that Canada has public health care? Learn how it works, who can get it, and what services are covered. Get the details and helpful tips. What are we doing? We have a mass immigration problem in this country that is affecting housing, healthcare, jobs, and even just societal cohesion. And the liberals are posting advertisements, presumably for the consumption of people outside of Canada, because this doesn't make sense if you're inside of Canada to be reading, promoting that you can come here and get free healthcare. No, no, no. In fact, we should be changing the rules to make it that you actually should have to buy into our healthcare more than just paying taxes if you've just arrived 5 seconds ago and you want to basically, make bring like use all of the healthcare services available to you. We just cannot have our country become a doctor's office for everyone around the planet who can't get healthcare in their own countries, or else we won't have healthcare either, and we really at this point don't have healthcare. And rightfully so, you had people like Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre calling this out, how insane it was. It was covered up, obviously, by independent media outlets like Juno News this morning. Juno News covered the story, and Pierre Poilievre here quote tweeted their story and said, "Liberal immigration at its best. They spend your tax dollars advertising to people overseas, promising them free health care if they come. Well, you can't find a doctor or get care. Enough, sign here to fix the broken liberal immigration system." And it's obviously just a conservative petition there. But this was an issue that if you are, let's say that you are liberal, you're the Liberal Party chief of staff, like the Liberal government chief of staff, or you're the comms director, tell your people to say nothing. Don't say anything because this is an obvious loss coming for the Liberals. Nobody's going to read this. No moderate voter who's winnable is going to read this and think that the Liberals are right for advertising healthcare services around the planet while we still can't actually get them in a timely manner. But something possessed the man to say something. And Mark Miller, the former I think the former immigration minister, I believe, has come out to attack Polyev. And he says, this is from the same Pierre Polyev who spent months pandering to groups across the country, promising visas for all and to stop deportations. You can't make this up. There's actual footage of him doing this if people care to look. It's very funny that Mark Miller is now basically acting like the PPC and saying, that Polyev was not pure enough on immigration previously. And by the way, I thought Pierre Polyev was way too soft on immigration before this last election, and since then he has toughened up on it a lot. But what's your point, Mark? If this was a criticism coming from the PPC about Pierre Polyev, it would make more sense because at least they can say that they've never been in favor of mass immigration. The thing is, Mark Miller, you were the one doing the thing wrong, and Mark Miller is basically saying, "Why didn't Polyev oppose me harder? He knew I'm an idiot. He knew I was doing the wrong thing. Why didn't he jump in front of me and stop me from doing it?" It's like, what are you talking about? This is not exactly a way of trying to turn this L into a W. It is still firmly in the L category. Trying to say that previously Polyev was on the wrong side does not mean that he is not on the right side now. But that was just how the day started. We had a lot of other stuff happen both today as well as in previous days that did not make the Liberals look very good. Let's jump over to this one where we have Andrew Lawton questioning a Queen's University professor who is coming out basically to argue in favor of bail reform. The thing that lets people keep getting back out of prison every single time they commit a crime. They'll get maybe booked, maybe they don't even get charged, but they'll be arrested and then released the same day, no matter how many offenses they've committed. And this was somebody that I am not sure if Andrew Lawton brought them in or the Liberals brought them in, but my goodness, if you are the Liberal comms director, you should be trying to make sure this person never gets in a committee room again because they are obviously crazy.
Mr. Lawton. Thank you, witnesses, for your time and testimony today. I'd like to start with you, if I could, Dr. Myers. You mentioned that the bail system is the harshest it's ever been. Those were your words. Do you think bail should be made easier to access after the culmination of our research here?
I think it absolutely needs to be more readily available for a lot of people in custody. I think we can acknowledge that there are some people who are perhaps too risky or the allegations are too serious. We want to focus our attention on those, not an automatic decision to detain, but to be able to focus on those. We need to make release more available for all kinds of others who are there for more minor reasons.
This person teaches university students. This person is saying that our bail system has never been more stringent, despite the fact that it is just a well-known fact in this country that we have sometimes multiple assault perpetrators and sometimes people who have assaulted children just automatically being released from jail the same day they committed their offense. This person teaches university students. They are politically delusional. This is just what you look like when you become this much of a Marxist. You just do not have the ability to perceive reality. And by the way, I don't know why she's dressed like an NFL football player at a divorce proceeding, but this is the outfit she chose to come and defend the current bail system and say that it's actually too strict.
So what are the sorts of offenders that are being detained pre-trial now that you think should be getting bail and aren't and don't have it available to them?
Most of the folks that have been charged with nonviolent offenses.
Okay.
And that would be the bulk of the individuals that go through our bail court.
You guys, nonviolent offenses. That means robbing a store. That means shoplifters, thieves, people trying to steal cars. The thing is, I think all criminals should not be granted bail if they have been repeatedly committing a crime. You're a shoplifter, you get arrested once, it's your first infraction, okay, you can get out on bail. That's fine. Show up to your court date. You do it a second time, you're being held until your court date because you obviously cannot be trusted. I hate this idea that nonviolent crimes don't matter. As long as someone wasn't bludgeoned over the head, it's okay. No, it's not. It's actually ruining communities. It's ruining people's lives. It's actually preventing people from getting to work when they have their car stolen, and Canada has become the car theft capital of the world. This is bonkers. The idea that we actually have these people in our institutions of higher learning teaching kids, and they have just no logical common sense. They have no common sense when it comes to just being able to read a news story and then conclude maybe it's a bad thing to just let people out over and over again just because, oh, it's a nonviolent defense. And by the way, we constantly let out violent offenders. So what's she talking about?
You talked about in your career as an academic, quote, interviewing justice officials and accused individuals.
Yes.
You didn't mention victims, victims of crime. Have you interviewed them as part of your research?
No, I study the criminal justice system, not rather than what happens with victims.
Do you think that the experiences of victims should have any bearing on how offenders are treated by the justice system?
Absolutely. The victims are critically important in all of this, but nonetheless, we need to remember the very important constitutional rights that we have, and that those must absolutely be protected, and that while there may be harm to victims,
Where is the constitutional protection to never be held in jail before your trial because you keep committing thefts, because you keep engaging in larceny? Like, what are we talking about? You have a constitutional right to basically keep running around committing your offense until the trial date where they maybe will put you in prison, and often they don't anyways.
we can provide those supports that they may need outside of the criminal justice system where they would be far better served.
But why in 20 years of researching this has interviewing victims not factored in if you think they do have a role to play in the way these decisions are made and these policies are drafted?
Because it has not been part of my research agenda. I've spent the time sitting in court and talking to those who I'm interested in the process of bail. I'm sitting in court. I've heard from many of victims about their experiences that comes out in the open court.
So you do indicate that people should, I'm paraphrasing, but you said they should be punished after a conviction.
Yeah.
So who should be held behind bars pre-trial in your view?
I think a very limited number of people. If we go back 40 years, we used to be sitting much closer to about 20 or 30% of those in our provincial jails were in pretrial detention. I suspect those are the folks that needed to be there, while other folks were able to be better managed in the community.
Well, how does she know that those ones should be there, but the ones who are getting out now shouldn't have been there? Like, and also listen to that answer to the question. He says, who should be held pre-trial? Reasonable, non-crazy people. I would say that you should basically be holding repeat nonviolent offenders and just any violent offenders. If you've committed a violent crime and it wasn't just getting to a stupid fight at a bar or something like that, yeah, you should probably be held. If you stabbed somebody, you should be held. Because unless it was a crime where we can determine that you had a specific problem with this person and now we're going to make sure that you're not going to see them again in some way or whatever, you should pretty much always be held if you're a violent offender. Unless again circumstances dictate that it's a one-off, but you still need to face punishment, but you can still go to work or whatever the next day. I would say that all nonviolent offenders who repeat the offense should be held too. But if she wasn't crazy, at least say, well, of course, violent offenders. All she says is a very limited number of people, because I guarantee you, when we get to a violent offender, she'll be like, well, what race are they? And then we'll determine whether or not they should actually be held.
Do you think that anyone who's charged with first-degree murder should be behind bars pre-trial?
I would leave that to the decision makers to properly examine the information that's been provided to assess the risk and make those decisions.
So you think bail for first-degree murders is actually legitimate at times?
I think in some circumstances it could be possible. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not the one making these determinations.
There are actually some cases where you could make the case where somebody who was accused of committing first-degree murder could be let out. It would be like a situation where the person was accused of killing a very particular individual, but there's no indication the guy's going to go on a spree or whatever if he's even guilty of it. But in generally speaking, most first-degree murders are the type of criminals who shot somebody in the commission of a crime that you cannot let out of prison. Most first-degree murders are not these whodunit cases where the person is like a lawyer who's accused of killing their ex-wife who's a baker down the street or something like that. Most of them tend to be gang related, and they should absolutely always pretty much be held.
And I trust the professionals who have all of the available information to be able to make the appropriate decision in these cases.
Another comment you had made was that we cannot predict future behavior. You were basically you were saying that we can't predict who will commit future offenses. So I would assume from that you're against 3 strikes, you're outlaws that have been proposed, correct?
Absolutely.
So how many convictions is enough for the system to actually say, we have a pretty good indication this person is going to reoffend?
Well, we might be able to look at measures that indicate that somebody has a record of offending, and those are exactly the kinds of pieces of information that are considered by those who are making bail decisions.
So you do think multiple convictions you do think should actually count against someone in their bail eligibility?
I think it should be a factor that is considered and weighed appropriately. It should not be the driving and the only reason. Each one of those convictions, that individual's already been punished and held accountable for those offenses. At some point, we have to acknowledge that they have moved on.
What happens if they keep getting rearrested before any trials taking place? Because trials take a while. That is like most shoplifters in every city in Canada. It's people who just keep doing it over and over again because they know they're not actually going to be held accountable. And they tend to operate in kind of small gangs where they pool all the stuff they sell and then they have someone else sell it for them. And they all know that the system's not actually going to punish them. That's why they do it oftentimes in the middle of the day. I used to work at a liquor store. It will happen in the middle of the day because they were never going to be arrested.
Let's focus on what the allegations are saying of what they've done now.
So someone who's committed murder against an intimate partner, someone who has robbed a bank, someone who has committed violent offenses, they
Allegedly.
are arrested. No, I'm talking about someone who's convicted. They have 5 convictions under their belt. Your view is that that is a clean slate if they've already served their sentence the next time they're up for bail?
I said nothing about it being a clean slate. I said
You
absolutely
did. You said they've
no.
already paid their price.
They have paid that price, but nonetheless, the criminal record is a critical component that is considered by decision makers when making the evaluation on the level of risk. We cannot perfectly predict. We can make predictions on the basis of offenses or records, but they are imperfect, meaning we are getting it wrong a lot.
Nicole Myers, Queen's University. Impeccable scholarship, no doubt, right there. Again, I can't get over that outfit right there. Andrew Lawton has also put out a tweet today that I thought it was a really good summation of the current liberal approach to justice reform. We have Bill C2, which actually it's rumored that they actually might just kill themselves because of how unpopular it is. But Andrew Lawton, he says, Bill C2, border bill that bans large cash transactions and allows warrantless mail searches. Bill C8, cybersecurity bill that lets government force people offline without oversight. Bill C9, justice bill that lowers threshold for hate. Can the Liberals do anything without tampering on civil liberties? And Bill C9, too, the way that they have basically altered the word hate that allows them a far broader scope to go after people, it's not that you are trying to directly incite hate and violence against a person. Like saying, that guy over there, he did this, that, and the other thing, and they're not true, and you're saying someone should get that guy. Yeah, that person should be obviously arrested. But now they just say the idea that you're just kind of generally spreading hatred. Just generally, your opinions are too hateful, and then so you should be arrested. That's basically what Bill C9 is. It's patently insane. And it's one of those things where you'll even have people on the left calling it out as kind of being draconian. But now let's move on to some economics here with Conservative MP Kyle Seaback, who actually back on October 10th, but this has actually ramped up just today, was calling out the Liberals for their really poor, I guess, approach to trying to save the auto industry in Canada in the face of tariffs. Because other than throwing just cash at the industry, they're not actually trying to make it a better place. They're not trying to make Canada a better place for the auto industry. They're simply basically keeping all the same bad taxes and regulations, but just throwing a bag of cash at the industry every once in a while, hoping that that's going to be enough to keep them in Canada. And we have just proven today that it's not.
Yesterday, we retreated to an incredibly embarrassing display as the Prime Minister stood here and bragged about a 10% tariff on Canadian auto. I had the privilege of meeting with Unifor auto workers earlier this week, and they told me a 10% tariff on auto will mean the end of the Canadian auto industry. Wow. So either the Prime Minister is unbelievably uninformed about what will hurt the auto industry, or he actually doesn't care when President Trump says he wants to take the auto sector. Is that why the Prime Minister is going to send $1 billion of investment to the United States so they can build more auto jobs for the Americans?
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives need a reality check.
That's right.
At the end of the day, there were 60,000 jobs created. Almost half of those are in the manufacturing industry.
Now, on the breaking news in Canada's auto industry, Stellantis is moving Jeep Compass production that was planned for its Brampton, Ontario plant to the U.S.
Don't try to give us a lesson when we have a prime minister that understands the needs of Canadians. That's why we're building Canada strong.
It's all been going very well, of course. So yeah, we're losing that Stellantis plant, the Jeep Stellantis plant in Brampton, because we're not a good place to set up shop for any businesses. Again, it's one of those things where lower corporate taxes, lower general income taxes, lower regulations. Because at some point, if all you're trying to do is just throw enough money to keep the industry here, the thing is the industry is just going to get tired of just hoping for bailouts, and they'll just go down to where they can actually make money in the U.S. So what are we even possibly attempting to do in this country right now? Oh my goodness. And this is the thing that the Liberals have been pushing on. Now they're trying to pretend that they are now trying to reform bail reform. We're going back to this issue a bit. And it says, Liberal Party, new, we're strengthening Canada's criminal code to keep violent and repeat offenders out of our communities. Quote, we're making bail stricter to keep you safe. PM announces bail reform bill. And I want to get up to the next post because it feels like they just assume that the way that they're going to convince you that he's actually serious about this is just having more police standing behind him in photos. On this post from Mark Carney's account, it says, strengthening the criminal code is one way we're combating crime. We also need the people and the resources to enforce the law. That's why Canada's new government is hiring 1,000 more RCMP personnel across the country to keep your community safe. Do you know how pathetically low that number is? And apparently we're also supposed to hire like 1,000 new border agents, but we've still not hired a single one. 1,000 RCMP officers across the country. Currently, we are in a Calgary mayoral election where the candidate I am backing, Sonia Sharp, in one city, the city she's running in obviously, is planning on hiring 500 new police officers. So Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of the country, is planning on hiring just double the police officers that a local mayoral candidate is in Calgary. This doesn't mean anything. And he's just surrounded by cops as if he's some big pro-cop prime minister. He's not. And the whole bail reform thing that they're going to reform bail, it's nothing. They're giving extra tools to prosecutors to maybe hold people, but they're not getting rid of Bill C-75. That is the same-day automatic bail reform law that is currently causing all the problems. So prosecutors have more tools to potentially keep these people from accessing the same-day automatic bail, but it's not going to help things out much because prosecutors still have to bend over backwards to utilize the tools the federal government is giving it to try and argue that somebody should not be released. But right now in the current system, they pretty much get released within a few hours, giving prosecutors basically no time. And so we are not going to see literally anything improve because of this, because that's stupid. We still have the underlying problem with a small Band-Aid on top of it. But yeah, this was the week that we had with the Liberals. It was not very good. The jobs stuff, like the jobs reports have not been great. And we also have basically like pretty much the Liberal brand falling apart in many parts of the country. The Newfoundland and Labrador provincial election, despite the PCs there being probably really squishy type Tim Houston PCs, it was demonstrative of the fact that in a place in the country where the Liberals should still be strong, especially on a provincial level, the brand just isn't there anymore. John Hogan, the Premier of Newfoundland, he wasn't on the job for very long. He was only on the job since March, I believe, March or May. He had a very high approval rating. But it turns out it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, people don't like the Liberal policy. So they can like your smile. They can think that Carney's a nice guy. But I don't think they're actually going to vote for him in another election. They didn't vote for him last time. They just voted against Trump. And now that issue, based on all the pollsters polling, has fallen down to like 5th and 6th place in terms of what people care about, which is a far cry from being the number 2 issue for all Canadians And the reason why the Liberals won is a large portion of Canadians made that their one and only issue was to spite Trump. Because, yes, that's why we vote in Canada, to spite a world leader on the other side of the border, which doesn't have that much to do with us. Yes, we have the tariff issue. But the thing is, if we actually had a better leader, the tariff issue wouldn't have actually been an issue because we could have solved it rather than fumbling around and then having to beg to just get back to the negotiating table as we keep doing things to tick them off and then we don't actually play ball at all when we actually are at the table. It's maddening. But this is why people think that Mark Carney may be attempting to call an election earlier than we thought, because the budget is apparently going to be a bloodbath in terms of all of the debt, the size of the deficit, and the size of the deficit it's likely going to predict for the next year. So Carney may actually want to have an election within a year from now so that all of the bad economic news doesn't hit him before the election happens. Because usually bad decisions made today takes a couple of years to actually see the light of day. The sort of consequences of those bad decisions germinate for a while and then they burst onto the scene. So Carney is going to spend up a storm, promise all these new benefit programs, promise all these new welfare programs, dump a bunch of money into select industries, and then he will see if he can run himself into a majority government to save himself from a snap election happening when all the bad economic news finally hits. But anyways, that should be it for this video today, guys. Again, if you live in the city of Calgary, check out my endorsement list for the Calgary mayoral and council elections in the description and pinned at the top of the comments. I have a full list from mayor, every single council seat, as well as public school board. I'm only missing one public school board position, and then I only endorsed 2 Catholic school board positions. Naturally, those kind of positions can be a little bit more vague on who the good candidate is. And frankly, I don't vote in Catholic school board elections, so I just endorsed a couple people that I know are personally good, but it's not like I've interacted with these people before that much or that I interact with that level of government in any way. So I believe the only one I'm missing is like Ward 5 and 9 or something like that when it comes to school board, but everything else is currently filled in. So check that out if you're still undecided on who you want to vote for and you just want my recommendation. And with that being said, thank you guys all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.